My name is Sue. Well, first name is Sue, last name is Joun. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. And I'm with Diversity at Workplace Consulting Group. And we do exactly what the name says. We work with organizations to diversify their workforce, to reduce workplace inequities, and to create new inclusive norms. That's simple.
Hello, my friend. How are you today?
Today I'm good. The sun is shining, and that part is always a good thing. And I think, you know, on the surface, I'm good. I have a lot to be grateful for. My family's, healthy, all of that. Underneath the surface, it has moments depending on where my head is going in terms of what's happening right now around us. It's you just it soaks in, and you don't necessarily want it to not soak in. So I have good and bad days, but overall, I'm good, and I'm happy to be with you.
Oh, I love it. All right, so we're gonna get to that. We're gonna get to a lot of those conversations. I met Sue. She was on. I was at a Blue Cross Blue Shield event many years ago, and it was a diversity inclusion panel. And I usually do not enjoy diversity inclusion panels because they're so textbook.
Yeah.
Just white, black. It's just so textbook. And I'm like, when I tell you, I went to this event kicking and screaming. I didn't want to go to this event. I walked in, and you were the moderator, and there were four other individuals on the panel. And what really made me happy was that every single person on the panel was mixed race. And I'm like, what's happening here? And the head of Blue Cross Blue Shield, he is Jewish, and he said, I go, you're seeing things that are different because this is the way that I was raised. It's not because the board told me I had to do it this way. It's not because like I felt like I want to sit there and get attention, and all of a sudden this is why I'm doing it. I was raised this way by my family from the get-go. And so this is the only thing I know. And I'm like, you got Jodi's attention because it's the way I was raised. It's not just white or black. Being first generation born in America, it's so much more. And to see mixed race individuals talking about different ways of seeing racism, different ways of seeing, well, I won't call it culture, was like, And then you got up there and you were just like, boom, 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 challenging them. And I'm like, I need to know this woman. I just need to know her because she's doing it right. She's just doing it right. So that just so that everyone knows how I fell in love with Sue, because you're doing things right. So before we get to know what you do and how you do it and why you do it, we want to know who you are. Who are you? Where did you come from? Where do you live? Let's paint us through the story before the job and before the degrees.
So I am an immigrant. So I came to this country when I was 7, almost 8. I landed in the land of Arizona, and it was very clear and obvious. So not only was it a cultural shock going from South Korea to Arizona, it was also a temperature shock because hot palm trees, but it was also a language shock because I literally couldn't understand anything or say anything. And there was no food that I was familiar with. There was no building I was familiar with. There was no faces I was familiar with. So it was just a complete shock of going from one entity to another where everything was different. And as far as I can see, like literally my eyes could see, there was no other Asians that I could see. I never ran into any at the grocery store. I never saw any at the school. And so it was, I learned from a very early age. I went from being one of the majority to being one of the only, or the only, and in a very quick fashion, at a very young age. So I've always been acutely aware that I'm someone of difference. And then the, the the other parts that were very lasting for me was the inability to actually communicate. So I'm literally walking around not understanding anything. And when I went to the schools, the public school system, they never had an Asian before, and they never had someone who didn't speak English before. So they didn't know what to do with me. So they actually put me with speech and hearing impaired children. So my second language was actually sign language. It was actually not English. And that did not do me any good in the playground though, because I still couldn't communicate. And for a few years, um, you know, because especially those days when kids don't understand who you are, they really only have two choices: ignore your existence or bully you. So I had a little bit of both. And I remember this one day, this kid kind of shoved me. In those days, it was all monkey bar, metal and cement. There was no soft grounds. He pushed me, and my head hit the monkey bar, and I got this big lump. And I remember this teacher coming up to me, clearly trying to understand what happened, right? And I literally couldn't tell her. And I went home, and I didn't want to tell my family because I didn't want them to worry. So I actually kind of made a decision right around that age that once I could communicate, once I could figure this out, I will never not use it. I will never not, I will always use the opportunity to communicate for myself and for others who can't.
It's very interesting that you that whole entire concept of not able to communicate. So
Yeah.
first generation born here. My
Yeah.
mom was 8.5 months pregnant, came to America, but we were only in the bubble of the Haitian community. So
Mhm.
only spoke French.
Mhm.
And it's so interesting that when you're in a school and you're not grasping onto the English language very easily, you're
Mhm.
automatically put into the disability category.
Mhm. Mhm.
They push you away because they don't know what to do with you. And it was
Mhm.
one of those things for me where I used humor. So for me, it was like I used humor to deflect anything or anyone that can come near me. So if
Mhm.
I didn't know how to do something or say something, I just threw in a joke or I threw in a funny or like I was I won class clown and most talkative as class superlatives because I really refined it so well
Mhm.
throughout my life. And I remember when and it was just so embarrassing where the special ed teacher would come in and they're like, Jodi, come on, it's Simon. And I'm like, no, like you're bringing more attention to me. What are you doing? I've
Mhm.
tried to avoid this. And it's like, they're like, we're trying to help you. We're like, no, you're not helping me. You're hurting me because these kids are going to be meaner. They're going to be mean. Kids are mean and they have no filter and they don't know what to do with you. And you're right. And being one, I mean, I grew up in Brockton where Brockton is very diverse now, but it wasn't when we were there. We were one of very, 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 very few brown families, very, 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 very few African American families, very few Asian, very few everything. You saw where everyone was, and it was one of those moments where you just wanted to like, just I want to just kind of blend in and just do my thing and have fun and enjoy and play sports and be a kid. And yet you're now pulling me out of a class saying, "Oh, you're not smart." No, I'm smart. I just can't learn like you.
Yeah. To all of that, I think, I've been thinking a lot about my childhood lately, and you really it was, we didn't even have a small group. I literally had, and um, I didn't quite catch on to English, and all my attempts at English was, mocked and ridiculed and corrected, of course, in terms of pronunciation, wrong words, grammar, you name it. And so I don't think I became fully fluent until probably, I want to say, fourth grade. And my writing didn't become fully grammatically correct until eighth grade. And so I remember, in eighth grade, my English teacher was this most crankiest person I've ever met. And he would just mock up my paper. Like I would just get it back and it'd be like 50 out of 100. And it was like 90% red ink just
Yep.
off. And but boy, it motivated me because it was kind of like, all right, let me get this pronoun verb thing correct. And all of those things still, ask my colleagues, like all that grammar lessons still stick with me to this day. And he definitely made me a much better writer. And there was like a distinctive eighth grade to ninth grade leap that happened. And I think, it's one of those things where there's a certain survival mechanism that kicks in, right? You used humor. You have to decide, Do I act like the group to be welcomed in?
Mhm.
Do I even ask the group to be welcome in? Do I just hang out there and do my own thing? Do I like what is your place in society, in the school society? You have to make those choices. And when I was small, you don't know anything, so you just go with your instinctive choices. So
Mhm.
through my entire academic years, and you could even say in my professional years, I was constantly coming in and out of circles. So sometimes I will assimilate and get accepted in, and then that will exhaust me, and I'll just kick myself out, and then I'll hang with all the others that don't belong in other circles. And then I need to get something done, so I would go into a circle, and oftentimes I was sort of in between circles.
Mhm.
And as an Asian, you are in this no man's land to begin with, right? In a way, you're kind of accepted in with the majority, but you're not feeling as much pain as some of the other minorities, and as you don't have as some of the history. So you're sort of a lot of times in no man's land. And when you're in no man's land, you're somewhat invisible, and no one remembers your name anyway, or they remember the wrong name, and then after a while you're like, are we interchangeable? So a few thoughts go through your head. First, the interchangeability. So you're invisible because
Mhm.
they don't quite know how to bucket you. Second, they don't really remember your name.
Yep.
Third, they confuse you with someone else. And then they see you as a worker, something they can get something out of, but not necessarily as a leader. And so when those things happen, you just sort of work hard, and then your parents are telling you work hard, get the degree, make it so they can't
Get those
deny you,
grades. Yep.
right? All of that, and you do all that, and then you're like, well, where are my dreams? What? And then when you realize you have a dream, but there's no one else that looks like you even remotely in that dream bucket. So you go through these, and growing up, I learned my survival techniques and I know how to walk the talk. I know how to talk the talk to get accepted into this group. I
Mhm.
know how to survive and still be, true to myself. I got to keep some core of me self, and all of that. So in a in a in hindsight, because everything looks better in hindsight, my entire life was leading up to what I do now. And for the
All right,
longest
I have to stop you because like I go because like we're going into it. So I want to rewind a little bit.
yeah,
Why Arizona? You're coming to the States, you could have gone anywhere. I mean, like, why did your parents pick Arizona?
you,
What was that compelling thing?
you can't go anywhere though. That's kind of a misnomer. So my father wanted to get educated here. So my father's plan was to come here, get educated, and go back.
Yep.
And he applied to different schools, and he got accepted to University of Arizona. And then we actually moved to Texas because he got accepted to University of Texas. And then we moved to Boston because he got accepted to Harvard. So we literally followed my dad's education plan. So it wasn't a research of where are there more Koreans, or where are there, maybe we could have gone to New York or California. No, it was really, where did my dad get accepted to school? Where does he want to go next? And that's where we're going.
Okay.
Yeah.
When you so you're like trying to figure out who you are in school. When you're talking, I'm like, it's duplication of like growing up in my house. Um, when you say that you couldn't talk to your parents about what was happening in school, and this is, I'm sure it wasn't just elementary, it was like probably throughout your entire education where things would happen. Who did you talk to? I mean, if you couldn't talk to your parents, who did you talk to? I mean, for us, I mean, we had, I'm sorry, because we had relatives here. So we had relatives, not in, so my dad made a collective where most Haitians do Haiti, New York, Florida. That's the route. And my dad's like, I'm not that kind of a person. So he did New York, Haiti, New York, Boston, Charles River, Charlestown. He's like, it's destiny, it's education. I want to be there. And so we were the only ones in our family. We were the only ones here. And we found two other Haitian families that came after us, like years after us. And so there was like the two or three families that we had here. But we had our relatives in New York. So we were always, every Sunday, every Saturday, we were on the phone with all the relatives. Every other weekend, we were in New York. Once a month, we were in Montreal. So we were raised with our relatives, but not on top of our relatives. So who did you communicate with when you had all these things happening?
No one. And so that there is no one. I had no relatives around me for the longest time. I had a few friends come in and out of my life. So I spent a lot of time alone. And I ended up spending the majority of my free time at the library. I was literally there from after school, usually until they closed, and then on weekends. I mean, it got to the point where all the librarians knew me and greet me and send me on errands. And in one summer, I read 120 books. And the reason why I remember that is the librarian actually decided to keep track. I literally would just sit in the aisles and read books. And it was so books were my friends and my friends were my books. And I didn't expect to have this conversation today, but we'll go there. So, and what was beautiful about it, I was actually thinking about this recently, is I was developing values and developing my opinions and forming thoughts during this time. And books gave me words to articulate what I felt. And it helped me not only learn English, but it actually put words to things I inherently knew into concepts and into stories. And I was like, that's how it is. That's how that is. That's the trials and tribulations. That's that I now know how to articulate how I feel. It really became my source of vocabulary. And it put words into my feelings, and it put words into my values, and it put words and my love of words still continue to this day. I'm constantly figuring out best ways to say things and communicate things in a way that makes sense, not only for myself, but for others. And books were my friends. So for the longest time, I didn't have anyone to talk to. I had to kind of process the hurt myself. I had to kind of process techniques myself, and I had to kind of think through things myself. And it wasn't so much because my parents weren't available. It was just they had no one. And I didn't want to burden them with my own issues. And at least at the time, that's what I thought. And because they were trying to survive, they were trying to, they were trying to make a living. They were trying to navigate the system. They were trying to figure out what to do. And I felt like it was the least of the problems. And so it's not so much even holding it in. I literally self-processed a lot, and I used books. And then every once in a while, I had a great teacher or a great librarian or a great neighbor that I could connect with. And those were beautiful moments. I was also an intense observer of people. So I would watch people all the time, see how they communicate, see how they interact. I also watched a lot of TV. So in addition to books, some of my vocabulary came from Love Boat, Starsky and Hutch. You can only imagine what my vocabulary.
I'm just laughing because I'm like, yep, like Dukes of Hazzard. Like, I mean, I'm going through the shows.
Dukes of Hazzard, Solid Gold, T.J. Hooker,
Yeah.
a little bit of Dynasty, and all of those, and Adventures of Spider-Man on Saturday, all the superheroes, and all of that kind of made me optimistic because good prevails.
Oh my God, I love it.
It made me optimistic because no matter how long the book, no matter how long the story, no matter how long the series, at the end, the good prevails. So I always had that hope.
That's you just it would give like literally you're talking and I'm just having memory lanes in my brain. And I'm like, I go, this is so much fun. This is what a great way to call it, start like this conversation. Rewind to the point where now education, what's your degree? And like if you choose to go to school, like I didn't look at, but what's your educational path at this point, as well as how do we get to where you are right now?
Yeah, so I went through, ultimately I ended up in Chelsea. So I went through the Chelsea school system, and we all know the history of Chelsea. So I went there right before it got better. But there were some amazing...
People that are listening anywhere they are, they don't know the history of Chelsea. So give us a little snippet.
So when I was in Chelsea, it was a relatively economically poor neighborhood. And most of it was it was starting to become a mix of different ethnic groups, but there were a lot of Vietnamese, Cambodians moving in. Chelsea was at one point, I guess, in its first history, was a very wealthy town, and then it ended up becoming much more socially economically challenged. And so there was not much money for school. So right around the years I was going there, Chelsea High School was considered one of the worst high schools. In fact, it eventually got taken over by BU and the city and state and so forth, and they rebuilt that whole high school. I graduated way before that happened. And I remember walking through the halls and seeing kids who I was like 22 because they never finished, they just sort of stayed. But we had these some amazing teachers who took a few of us and put us into these more advanced academic classes. And so that's where we prepped for SAT. That's where we, took AP English or did all these little things. So there was like 5 or 6 of us literally just sort of ushered through things. Of course, in hindsight, I look at that, I go, wow, what a disparity, everyone experienced in education. And so my parents were gung-ho on me going into medical school, because what better way to not have people deny your credentials than to be a doctor with a white robe. And so I said, okay, sounds good to me. And so I ended up going to Boston College as a pre-med, made it through a year, hated pre-med. Did I say hated pre-med? A few things became very apparent to me. I was not qualified, meaning I was standing next to students who went to these private high schools and did most of this stuff already. And even in my advanced science classes at Chelsea High, a public school system, I knew 1/10 of what they knew. So my freshman courses, not only was I learning what they were teaching me, I was learning what I had never learned before in high school. So the intense amount of catch up that I had to do. And, college is like any other educational institution, there are cliques, and you're either in it, in those study groups, or you're not. And I also didn't live on campus, so I was even more of a visitor, right? I didn't have time to gel with other students. So I made some amazing friends who I'm still in touch with to this day. But so it turns out I wasn't quite academically ready, but that I probably could have overcome. The subjects did not interest me whatsoever. And so I was standing next to people who were passionate about biology and had all these classes they had already taken and knew what the book and the professor was saying. I hated biology, and I had to not only read the textbook word for word because I didn't have that kind of material before, I also didn't understand a lot of the vocabulary. And so it was very apparent to me that pre-med wasn't for me, not so much from a qualification perspective, but because of interest. So now I had to have the big conversation with my family about how I do not want to be pre-med. So for my parents, mainly because they're immigrants and they didn't have a lot of exposure to the degrees of professions people could have, right? It's either manual labor or doctor. There was nothing in between for them, right? So it was sort of like you fail in life or you become a doctor kind of path. Like it was just that concrete for them. And I knew that. And so trying to have that conversation. So I held it in for a while. I went into my I went into my first semester of my sophomore year, and I finally said, I can't keep faking this. And so I finally had the talk with my parents. We didn't speak for 2 years. And I decided to change my major to English. That was my passion. Remember my love of words?
Mm-hmm.
That was my passion. And so I changed from pre-med to English. And I also told my parents, this is my decision. And so I will pay the price. So I will pay for college on my own. And so I had to drop out of school, go find a job so I could pay for the tuition. And you know how the conversations with colleges work. You could say, my parents and I are not talking. I want to be an independent student. they're like, you're not an independent student, so they still expect you to pay. So vigorous conversations we had. So a long story shortened, it took me 9 years to finish my undergrad. And I ended up actually a degree in sociology because remember my love of observing people. So I graduated after 9 years, but by that time I was fully ingrained into corporate America. I was my sort of I need a job became a career, and then I went and got my MBA. I did that in like I think I don't know 18, 20 months kind of thing. I was like had to go through that, and then I went back to school because I'm an immigrant. I got to get all these degrees, and so I went back to school and got a degree. So I have an MBA, and then I also got a degree in master's in nonprofit management with concentration in healthcare. And then I said to my family, if I ever say I want to go back to school, you've got to talk me off of that ledge because I am not doing this again. Because that's my.
I'm
Please
just
stop me from this madness.
it is just so crazy because my undergrad 10 years because I was in my career and I'm like I the choices literally the amount of certificates, the amount of degrees with the degrees overall that I have is like silly. And when I just completed one from MIT and I'm like, what am I doing? Like what am I doing? Who is it? Just it's now proving it to ourselves that we can do this and we can get into these top schools.
It's because perhaps maybe it's a bit proving yourself, but for me it's that residue of immigration and residue of my parents and residue of trying to break down barriers because there's a certain assumption on our part which we really have to overcome at some point as immigrants and as people of difference that we have to prove ourselves, that we have to be more. We have to do things that will make it so that the majority cannot possibly find reason to deny us access. And that burden we put on ourselves is not only a self-fulfilling prophecy, it sort of made it so that the majority now is conditioned to only accept a few and the best of us. And that is a systemic problem. And so that burns me up, like in case you haven't noticed, my voice raised, my blood, like it boils me to this day because we not only bought into that narrative, we are fulfilling that narrative. And so that is, one of the things that we're trying to overcome, but I am a walking, talking bias on.
But it's a twofold conversation here because, I mean, we're both, I mean, you're immigrant, I'm first gen. Learning the language and understanding. I mean, like I go, yeah, you took English. I didn't. So I was just constantly like trying to like, I mean, I will pay top dollar for a great editor because I can tell a story like nobody's business, but those damn commas and the pronouns, like it causes full anxiety for me. Sociology, maybe I have my double major undergrad communications and journalism and sociology. I go because people, I swear, people watching for me, look, my amazing moment sitting at the Met in New York with a knish, with a grape soda and a hot dog and just people watching for hours. Gotcha. It's my favorite.
I'm just moving to move the sun. So
yeah, no worries. So it's my favorite thing to do. And so you're talking and I'm like, I get it. But we're getting it from our parents because for me and our family, doctor, lawyer, or engineer. If you weren't one of those three, what are you doing? Why did we come to this country? So we're getting it from this side and we want to stand on our own 2 feet and we're getting it from society. And so I always felt like I'm in the middle of this weird world where I have to get the pressures on this side, but also the pressures on this side. And I'm just like a person, like, I mean, I'm dramatically, when I say dramatically different than all my other relatives, because I'm not the doctor, lawyer, engineer. I talk a lot. I talk fast. I just do these random things and they're like, what are you doing? And then when I get these top jobs and I start my company, they're like, how the hell did that happen? I'm like, because you guys gave me no other choice on either end.
Yeah. I mean, it's it's not easy. It's not easy because you're trying to make the group happy. You're trying to make your family happy and understand, and you're trying to make yourself happy. Yeah. And when they're not in alignment, that's where, this whole concept of authentic self and whole self, that's part of where that comes from, is when you have too many expectations or too many molds that everyone's trying to fit you in, and you realize you don't, and I could also say the same thing about the trans community. I could say that about, race. We could keep going with, of different abilities. We could keep going. And when there are certain expectations of molds and you have to conform into those molds constantly and switch, code switching, right?
Yep.
You pay a price for that.
Yep.
And not only is it exhausting, but you then only have a certain amount of energy left to produce.
Mm.
And on top of that, it's not sustainable. And I actually believe it's not fair to the society as a whole, because they're not getting all of us.
Yep.
And so, diversity helps with so many other things in organizations, right? There's so much white paper. It helps with culture, it helps with innovation, it helps with financial performance. It helps with all of these things. Yes, only if you unleash the diversity. If you just contain it into a box, you're not going to reap those benefits. And as a society, I don't think we're reaping the benefits of all the diversity that's in America, because we are putting them into different buckets and modes. If you think about the Arizona school system, English speaking students could not speak students.
Yeah.
You have a non-English speaking student who actually can speak and hear. Where do you put her? There is no bucket for her. Let's just put her in the speech and hearing impaired bucket. And that's what we do with people, right? We're like, what existing bucket can we put someone in?
Because we don't want to create a new bucket.
Instead of making a new bucket. Or instead of assuming it's one big bucket and everyone's in different places of that bucket that they move through, right? But there's this sort of just compartmentizing, and that's what we do with our workforce. She's analytical, let's put her here. She's good with detail, let's put her here. She's good with grammar, let's put her here. She's a good people person, let's put her there. She's a good, and we just, he looks great, let's put him in sales. It's like these very tight buckets that we put him in. Oh, you were in IT, well, then you will always stay in IT. What do you mean you want to do human resources? That doesn't make sense. And we put people in these buckets, and it's partly because of, there's many reasons for that. But it is automatic and it is inherent. And that's why the work is hard.
It's true. Talk about what you do exactly for a company briefly, because I want to know how your year was. March 2020, we were going into a pandemic. And then when I say we are going into pandemic, we're going into pandemics, a year full of pandemics.
Right.
And I, right before we started this conversation, I was talking to you about how my year was good because my onion kept on being peeled out, and my onion is so sweet now because all the layers that were just like, I was moving too fast and I just didn't care. I ignored whatever's. Now, look, my life is so drama-free, as well as it's just surrounded by people that are just genuine to their core and not on script, because I feel like people start going into scripts. So tell me again, briefly, what you do to talk about fully how the year was and how you were injected into all of this.
Sure. So what we do is kind of like what I said in the introduction is we work with organizations, we do trainings, we do conversations, we do process improvements, we look at different aspects of the talent cycle at an organization, basically to advance diversity, equity, and inclusion at all levels and all areas of the organization. It's basically that. So wherever the organization is in their journey with diversity, equity, inclusion, we help them. If they need training, we do that. If they need us to review and update their process, we do that. If they need consultation, we do that. If their senior leaders need coaching, we do that. So it's pretty that simple, and simple as in terms of describing it quickly. And we work with all different industries. So the part that's been fascinating about the business, the demand for that has been consistently high since we started. Most of it has been word of mouth. And then during COVID, going into that aspect of the conversation. So around March, things slowed down for a little bit, March of last year, when because a lot of our work is in person.
Yep.
And so we all thought it would be over in May, right? So we're like, let's just postpone it. So we were telling our clients to postpone it. We were talking to prospective clients to postpone it. So we had this bit of lull where we were we were using it to sort of develop ourselves because we thought it was just a couple of months, right? And then right around May, when we're like, okay, I guess it's not a couple of months, clients started coming back to us and say, you know what, let's not wait. Can we do this virtually? So our entire business became virtual. Consultations, all of that, training, all became virtual. And the demand just kept going up.
Wait, were you ready for that though? Were you ready for, I mean, had you done it before, and did it basically get to you to the point where like we had to stop and add it on, or was it just a nice flow?
A little bit of both. So we had done video and remote only when clients really needed it, because we like to do things in person, right? And so, and because we've done it before, we had the ability to do so. We knew how to do it, but we did also have to tweak some of our training modules. We had to tweak some of our delivery methods. We had to adapt to the technologies and change things so that it is just as impactful online or virtually as it is would be in person. So we had experience doing it remotely, yes, but we also had to tweak things so that it fit remotely, as opposed to just taking what was in person and just making it remote. Yeah.
So how did the year, again, as we kept on getting more and more things happening, the world's opening up, you're seeing ugliness. You're seeing a lot of ugliness in the most safest places for a lot of people. How did that affect you? How did that affect your family? How did that affect your job? Because it's not like you walked away from work and then you get to go home. Everything is now interlocking for you.
No differently than it impacted everybody who's listening to this, and you can't escape it. And so and we definitely can't escape, because it's not like we're number crunching all day. So when the murder of George Floyd happened, for example, our demand definitely went up. And then as individuals, so let me go. So we had a little bit of a lull, and then it just exploded even further than ever before, because murder of George Floyd certainly caused people to reach out to us more. But also because we were remote now, we had no geographical locations. So we were getting requests from all across the country. And so the demand for our business became much higher. And then as individuals, so you have as business, you're like, wow, demand is growing, right? So you have to figure out ways to make sure that we could accommodate that, and and turning away some, and being thoughtful about all of that. As individuals, though, you can't help but be impacted by the COVID. You can't be impacted by the murder of George Floyd. So there's the human part of you goes, really? It took the murder of someone and watching someone die on video to have you reach out to us? So there's that, right? You're sort of like, that's what it took. And then the other part of you goes, at least they're here now. And if whatever it costs them to be here, let's get them, let's get them educated and let's get them in. So you have these sort of, so you're processing it as a consultant, and you're processing it as an individual. And then you go home and you have people who are traumatized, whose entire world has changed because of this, as well as, and then you come back to work and you have colleagues there's death in their family because of COVID. There are people who are suffering from mental health issues that's getting exacerbated because of recent events, as well as COVID and lack of contact. And so this is the thing. Like every organization, every workplace, there is no separation. You can't have work and society separate. It blends in, and you can't help but you can't help but be impacted by all of that. And our organization was no different. We are absolutely impacted by COVID from a mental health, family dynamics, all of us as individuals, and we're also impacted by the trauma of what we see on TV and what is happening in society, from murder of George Floyd all the way to Atlanta, Georgia recently, and everything in between.
How are you able to balance it all? I mean, you're here helping your clients, you're here helping your team, you're here helping your family. How are you helping you? Because at the beginning, when you even said that your coping mechanism is like the books. I mean, you were in the library, and this is where you found a whole different world of the happy place. And I know you. I mean, it's so, as you're saying this, I know you as a very high energy person. And people always say that it's you, Jodi, that brings it out of like person that's like quiet. I'm like, I don't think so. I think they've always had it in them. So I only know you as in this high energy, powerful, and badass woman. And so how are you taking on the burden? I mean, like literally, it's the burden of all these things that are happening in our world right now. How are you taking care of you during this time?
Um, because, well, you know me, I don't like to just give you fake answers. So that's why I'm being thoughtful. It's complicated. And I think it's multifaceted. And what I mean by that is, let's go back to the beginning of this conversation. All that I went through, uh, having spent time by myself when I was young, being able to process the hurt on my own, being able to find comfort in things that weren't people, finding those special connections with certain people that I could be myself with. All of those things, if you think about it, have been coping mechanisms that stayed with me my whole life. And so what I do now is first, I recognize when I'm becoming very crisp. I recognize that I need something. I recognize that when I need a break. And so I am very conscious of keeping tabs on myself. I'm very open to people saying, okay, Sue, you're a little crispy. I'm also realizing that when my patience gets a lot shorter. So every day and every week, I have certain things that I do where it's by myself. And so there are times when I go home and because I talk and listen all day, that's my job. I don't want to talk and listen 24 hours a day. So I'm very fortunate to have a family who understands that. So I eke out some more energy when I get home. And then I literally, there's this like little spot in my living room. And I sit there and sometimes I read a book. Sometimes I knit or crochet. Sometimes I listen to music. Sometimes I just sit there. And sometimes I am literally trying to untangle a problem. And because don't forget, I observe people, I like words. So sometimes I'm like, okay, how do I explain this? Or why can't I articulate what I'm feeling? Or what is it that and all of that causes my brain to, because my brain rests sometimes when it's literally not doing anything and it needs a distraction like knitting or music, or when it's trying to solve something. And so I rest my brain. And from a physical perspective, I punch a bag for 25 minutes. No lie. I have a punching bag at home. I retook up kickboxing, so I literally punch a bag. I throw in a couple of planks, and I also love. I can't run. I only run if I'm running for my life. Literally, like if someone's not chasing me, I feel no need to run. So I go on long walks. I walk around Harvard Square. I recently just did that. A meeting canceled, so I took a walk and I went there, observed the blossoms that were still pretty. So I build in and I take the times that I can, and then when I talk to some friends, I talk to my family members, and I representing is hard.
Yeah.
And because I always knew when I was young, even in Arizona, like I was probably the only Asian they ever met. So I felt like they were going to make decisions on Asians based on me.
Yeah.
When I grew up, I'm like, all right, Asian female, working parent, whatever it was always representing something. And so representing is hard. And when the recent events and violence and against Asian Americans is happening and has always been happening or now has been brought to light. Yep. I actually have to make a decision for myself. Do I show up? How do I show up? Can I show up? And then do I have the mental capacity to show up? And those are all decisions you have to make when I think some people don't have to think about that. And then especially you layer on the fact that you are a DEI consultant and you're like, well, and so you really have to kind of think through all that. And I had to really sit and think, because the emotions are like right here. As a consultant, our job is to be objective. Our job is to bring our expertise. Our job,
we're bipartisan.
Right. I mean, correct. And you have to be, right. And you should be. And you're bringing in your expertise and knowledge with your own flavor, of course. But so much of that is the data and the studies and all of that. When I'm now talking about my Asian experience, my emotions are like literally 2 words behind what comes out of my mouth, right? And so you and your emotions, and so it's you really I personally had to really think about, do I show up? Do I have to show up? How am I showing up? And can I show up? And how much of myself do I want to bring into that? And I really had to wrestle that to the ground. And I was telling a colleague, I literally decided in the middle of a knitting project, in the middle of a song at 12:38 a.m. I'm like, got it. I know what I'm going to do. So that's how I take care of myself.
Where do we go from now? I have 3 more questions for you, but where do we go from this point? Because when George Floyd happened and the world, literally everybody was protesting all over the world. My cousin was on the podcast and we both looked at each other, we're like, what's the difference that what happened yesterday or last week? So now all of a sudden, all these things are happening, and I'm first generation. I fit into many categories: woman, minority, ethnic, learning disability. I fit into so many check boxes. I'm a walking check box. And I'm looking and I'm like, how do we, for me, I'm because I'm cynical. I go, how do I wrap my head around the fact that big changes are happening? People are like, big changes are happening. I'm like, I believe changes are happening. But when you say the word big to me, when I'm part of all these check boxes, I'm cynical. So where do we go from this point? Where do you see the next week, month, year in this industry, and that you are representing, that you are leading the force?
I think I'm pausing because so many words are coming to my mouth at the same time.
I know I just asked you a very loaded question, so I apologize, but I don't apologize.
No need to apologize. That's why we do this kind of conversation, because we could really talk about it and wrestle to the ground. And I don't want to say something just generic here, because generic doesn't solve problems. We have to do everything, I guess, is where we go from here. The system, big changes to me are big systemic changes. Yep. And we are nowhere near big systemic changes. We are examining some systemics and we are examining some things, but most of it is still in the phrase. So in the fringes, I should say. So I do think we have to continue to push and demand systemic changes in all aspects of our systems, rather it's the education system, rather it's the criminal justice system, rather it's the political voting system, rather it's the workplace dynamics, rather it's voting rights, rather it's, so many different things. And I really think, continue to push, continue to rally, continue to, I don't really care how you do it. If rally's your thing, do that. If churning out the votes is your thing, do that. If you are in a workplace and you could keep pushing the agenda at your workplace, do that. If you are a writer of books, write books. If you are doing podcasts, do the podcast. Whatever your space is, use it to push the envelope a little further. So that's one. Second is don't settle. We can't settle anymore. I don't want to settle with just a rally. I don't want to settle with increased awareness. I don't want to settle with 1 month given to each population in terms of heritage celebrations. I want us to come from a position of power and demand a place. I was talking to someone the other day, and I was on a panel too, and And this person was like, we need to be invited to the table. I said, no, we want the table.
Yeah.
This whole feeling of please let us in, done with that. We're already in. We just have to rebuild the doors where that door, we have to act like we're already in. And we have to really re-examine in our brains and other people's brain where that door was. And then,
well, the thing you say, like, we have to reimagine the door. My house has no doors. I mean, I'm sure you have those friends where the teenagers slam the doors and the dads and the mom, like, I go, don't slam the doors in my house. I'm taking the door off because it's my house. Don't slam the doors in my house. And so, which of course I would have gotten killed if I even slammed the door in my house. Yeah. But I mean, I'm like the whole time reinventing the door. I feel that there should not be a door. And by the way, I'm bringing my own table. I love that because I have designed things where people just don't have a rhyme or reason. They're like, what are you doing? I'm like, doesn't matter what I'm doing. It doesn't affect you. It's okay. I'm going to keep just doing what I do. I wake up in the morning and I'm still going to do what I do. And when I'm representing, it's a burden where if you're going to meet a Haitian person, I mean, and this has been throughout my life, but also globally, I 70% of my time, I'm overseas. First time in most countries that they see a Haitian. Korea, when I was in Korea for school, and I loved it. I loved it. Kimchi, I just had to, not gonna lie to you, I had enough of it. It was everywhere. I'm not gonna lie to you. I go, but I mean, just being there, and I was the first Haitian, and everyone's like, what do you mean you're not Black? I'm like, no. They're like, what's Haiti? Where's Haiti? Like, in our minds, we can't comprehend the islands. And I'm like, okay, I'm happy-go-lucky, and I'm going to teach you things because I'm all about educating, not prosecuting. And I think that we spend so much time prosecuting. Like, well, instead of being so, like, for me, I feel, instead of being so angry with everything, be the one that brings light and be the one that educates in every single way. And you've created that happy, safe place. I mean, you were on a panel with diverse, and the diversity that I want to see, because that's the way the world is, where there are mixed cultures talking about their different ways. And you brought out so much of them in a safe zone. And you do that not just, I mean, obviously we're Facebook friends, we're friends. And I go, I love that your kids, I mean, like your son, just badass, your son, so badass. You're making sure that past generations, this generation, future generations are seeing the world and doing things where we're constantly educating instead of just like pointing fingers and just like, no, you're wrong. You can't do this. Your culture is different, etc.
Absolutely. I mean, I think the solutions are, is solutions. The answer to your original question is, so where do we go from here? Is we keep going. And I guess the point I'm trying to make is let's keep going from a source of power and centeredness as opposed to panic and hurt alone. And let's not have competing pains. Yeah. Let's not try to yell at each other whose pain is greater. You feel pain, I feel pain, let's keep going together. And because at the end of the day, sometimes we sort of squabble with each other versus going into systemic changes. And I want to make sure that we go from a position of power and unity, but also allyship. And allyship to me, and for those, who wants to be allies, we absolutely welcome every ally. But here's what an ally is. Because we need allies to make the changes. We need to do the systemic changes. We need everyone.
And allies is not a new word. It's one of the things where people think it's like all these words are being thrown. Ally, right. If you're in business, you have allies. If you're like, we'll call it, you're in wars, you have allied countries. And so I think that people have to understand that these aren't just words that are just being thrown in. These are words that have always existed. We're just not using it to our benefits.
Absolutely. And, allies, here's what allies, and like I said, we could be allies to each other. We need allies because, at the end of the day, we need the critical mass to make systemic changes. So we need everyone to help, and we need everyone on board to kind of push that forward, right? And so we welcome allies 100%. And here's what allies, for me at least, it means. It means to amplify our voices so that we could reach critical volume. It doesn't mean speak for us. It means stand next to us and behind us so that we can have physical critical mass. It doesn't mean stand in front of us.
Right.
it also, and allyship is also a case of being there after the heritage months are over and the headlines are gone. I kind of joke, you use humor, I'll use humor. Kind of like being an ally only during Heritage Month is like coming to my birthday party only for the cake, right?
The wedding only for the party.
Exactly. Where I need you there 12 months out of the year,
Yeah.
not just when there is an event, not just when the month is, not just during Black History Month, not just during Asian Heritage Month, not just during Pride Month, not just during Autism Awareness Month, not just during Coming Out Month, not just during Diversity Week. We need you every day. So how do you show up every day at work, for example? When you're in a meeting and someone said something, amplify so that they're heard. If you notice they put themselves out there and shared an experience, ask questions, say, can you tell me more about that, as opposed to just having silence. When someone brings up, hey, maybe we should publish that material also in Spanish, second that and say, yes, I agree. Also, how about in French? How about in other languages? So really kind of the allies is to bring critical mass to rallies, to conversations at the workplace, to literally and figuratively and emotionally standing with us. That to me is an ally. So we need all the allies to push forward. So where do we go from here? We keep going. Wherever your niche is, push within that niche. Don't settle until we have systemic changes. And I would say that's the best thing we can do. Toni Morrison said in James Baldwin's, in her eulogy to James Baldwin, she said, James Baldwin said, our crown has already been bought and paid for. You just have to wear it. So let's all come from position of power. Stand tall, stand strong. We're here, we belong here, we're not going anywhere. We have our place.
Rewind back to your mom and dad. What do they think of you now in regards of what you've accomplished, what you're doing, how you are changing the world in your own way? What do they think of the non-doctor?
My father passed away a while ago now, and he passed away suddenly. And we were both lucky that we had some conversations during that time, because we knew the end was coming. Mm-hmm. And he and I had not always seen eye to eye. The love was there, but the synergy wasn't always there. And he choked up actually a little bit. And he said, I know you haven't had the easiest childhood, but you turned out really well, and I'm very proud of you. And it's all I needed. And it's all he needed. And I said to him, I think you did the best you knew how. It wasn't what I needed all the time, but you did the best you knew how. And I am absolutely 100% okay. And my mother has never looked back from doctor. We had to kind of fester through that for a while. See, this is the point. She never even knew there was a job called consultant, right? I'm not sure if she still fully knows what I do. And that's okay, because all she knows is I'm doing something and I'm happy, and people are listening to me, are not dismissing me. It's a viable job, and I think she's happy with that. And so the moral, I guess, of the story is, at the end of the day, you have to forgive and let go and understand that people could only come from their own perspectives, whether it's your parents, society, friends. And you have to accept that they're giving you all they can give you at that moment. That's it. You can't expect any more or less. And then you have to, at the end of the day, do your own thing. And you have to do the thing that gives you some sense of fulfillment. And let's also get practical. Sometimes your job may not be that source of fulfillment. Find another source. Some of us, we have to do the jobs to get a paycheck, and that's okay. That's how life turned out. That's okay for now. You could continue to figure out a different career path for you, absolutely. But if you have to put food on the table and you got to pay rent and you got to have this job, maybe that's not where you get your intellectual fulfillment. Find it somewhere else. That's may not be the place where you get your thing. Your fulfillment, your job doesn't have to be your source of everything. Your family doesn't have to be your source of everything. Find different places in your life to find different levels of fulfillment. Because at the end of the day, it's not about how many people you made happy. It's about, are people happy for you?
Oh, I love that so much. I would be remiss if I didn't ask about the fact that you own your own business. What year did you start? What are the highs of owning your own business? And what are the lows of owning your own business? Because during this time, people they've been at home and they have thought, I don't want to be here. I have a micromanager boss. This isn't the right job for me. You literally just paint the picture of like finding that place that makes you happy. So they're deciding this is the time, but I'm scared, but I am still getting paid by somebody else. When did you make the decision of starting your own business, and what were the highs and what were the lows of that?
So first I had to make the decision. So it turns out my brain is not capable of making more than one big decision at a time. So I actually had to make the decision to leave my company first. Then I had to make the decision of, do I work for someone else or do I work for myself? And so I made the decision to leave my organization, and then it took me months to actually leave. And then it took me months to figure out what is it that I'm going to do. Am I going to interview and find a job, or am I going to do my own business? So I was trying to do both for a while, and then I realized my brain can't do that. So I did interviews, and for me, I remember certain moments, because for me, how my brain makes decisions, it goes into this kind of, it just considers everything, and all of a sudden it's like decision made, and then I don't look back, right? And so that's how it was with when I decided to leave Blue Cross, because Blue Cross was good to me, So that's I kind of was like, all the pros and cons, and then it was like, got it, I'm leaving, and then I had to decide when to leave. And then when I was just trying to decide between interviewing and doing my own business, I went back and forth, and then I had this pivotal moment. I had just done 2 interviews that day, and then I had led a workshop in the evening for an organization. And I came home and I said to my family, I'm going to start my own business. My decision's made. That was October 30th. And
What year?
2016. And I knew, because it was very crystal clear to me, I no longer want to say the things that I know people want to hear. I want to say the things that I want to say. And if I continue to work for someone else, no matter how wonderful the organization, I will always be saying the things, because I was interviewing. I knew exactly what to say to be a finalist, right? And it was very clear. And so then I launched the business in November of that year. So that was my decision-making process. But then once you decide to launch the business, just because you build it, they don't come, right? So you don't want to be foolish like that, nor should you. Frankly, there are people in the world who's going to be like, you go get them. They're cheerleaders, but they're not going to give you money. They're not going to help you with your marketing plan. They're not going to. So you need the cheerleaders to help you emotionally, but then you also need to figure out, you either need to find people who could help you with some of that, or you need to learn it to do it yourself. And I really had to, once I decided to form the business, then I took November till January, because I launched the website in January of, well, okay, but doing what? DEI is a big topic. What's our differentiator? Who's our competitors? What is my value system? And then I had to decide, am I going to be self-employed or am I going to own a business? Those are very different things. And so I really had to I talked to a lot of people. I did a lot of research. I really had to sit and think about, what is my value? What is my niche? What is our approach that's going to be different? What's missing in the marketplace? It's literally business 101, right? This is what they teach you in business school, right? What is the opportunity? And so I spoke to everybody I could find. I read, as you know, I read tons. I observed. I went back and attended every event I could, think of. I sat and thought through and filled out notebooks, and what is it that we're going to be doing differently, and all of that. And then I made the decision January 2nd, and my website was launched January 3rd.
Beautiful. What was so would that constitute as the high and your lows?
Highs and lows. I would say the highs is in two places: seeing the clients, the impacts that we see in the clients, and then the growth of my team in their own journey and development. Those are my highs, and those come every day. My lows also come every day. I see a client who's not moving forward, or we have to turn away a potential client because we don't have the capacity yet, or all of those. So my highs are seeing the impact of my clients and sustained changes, and the individual growth of my team, because my loyalty lies with those two things, clients and the team. Those are my highs. And my lows are when I hear the same excuses all the time. Those are my lows.
Yeah. I think that's one of the things where in the marketing world, I do the same thing where I feel that, and I've said this very transparently, where marketing hasn't changed since the caveman days. You go into a cave, you see the drawings, there's a story that's being told. It hasn't changed. The way that we push it out has been added, not changed, but we are adding new ways of getting it out to a larger audience. But when I hear someone saying the same things where I don't understand marketing, I don't have time, I don't know how to do it, I'm like,
and find someone who does. Ask your friends and family. You don't have to know it all. You don't have to learn.
Or my favorite, the arrogance of I don't need it.
No, you do need. But I would say, and I know we've been discussing for a while now, so I don't want to take up too much time. But don't be intimidated. You can find someone who knows how to do this stuff, and don't be overwhelmed by the formality of things. When I say marketing, it doesn't have to be a 20-page deck with glossy things. It could literally be a paragraph that you wrote down of how you're going to reach people. It could be very simple.
But same thing with we'll call it diversity. I mean, people are like, I go, what do you think about diversity? I'm like, I walk into the room. I mean, I am the seed. I'm walking into the room and I'm planting myself. So here we go. So when someone tells me, well, I don't know how to do it, I'm like, walk up to someone and say, hi, my name is, and have a conversation. And what's so hard?
Learn. And the other thing is, I think the biggest misunderstanding about diversity, equity, inclusion is that passion alone makes you effective. It doesn't. You have to have a process. You have to have a plan. You have to have an approach. You have to learn how to influence. You have to learn how to, it's not just about convincing people. It's really about teaching them how to do it. And when you're teaching organizations how to do it, that's the plan, that's the process. And so passion gives you the fuel, but it doesn't give you the how. And that's the part about so much of diversity, equity, and inclusion work isn't just the topic of it. It's actually project management. It's actually, emails. It's actually training, which is the delivery of information. There's so much more to it. So I would say if you have the passion, that's a fabulous start, but that's only the start. Do the rest.
Well, I mean, I think that, overall in everything, education. You use the books. I do the same thing. I mean, I'm an audiobook person. I move too fast. So I love when I'm going for a run, I run to chapters. I go, so last year, 52 books. And everyone's like, how is that even possible? And I go, Friday at 4:00, my day ended. I threw on a book. I started doing my things. I would turn it off when I'm with friends and family. But by Sunday, it was done. So it was my happy place. And like astrophysics, where I would never read an astrophysics book, but it was really fun to actually listen to a lot of different scientists. And I'm like, okay, rewind. Let's just do this one more time because I just don't understand. But it was a great way to feed that knowledge. But I love that when I'm meeting with a client, I tell everyone, I will not know what you do. I know what I do. I know this is my specialty. This is my happy place. I can get anything done in the world of marketing, and I can consult on that one. You are an expert in what you do. Your only job is to teach me what you do so that way I can do what I do for you. So it's like, let's educate one another on not just our roles in our businesses, but in our culture, our foods, everything. Yeah. And when I learn and when I'm excited about that, then I want to know more and more and more. And this is why I am a global citizen. I do spend a lot more time overseas because I was always taught you can't learn about everything in a book. You have to actually take the book and the experience and put them together.
Yeah, I hear you. I actually, I think we've been together for like a
I
little
know
while.
we have. So
just
I
wanna
know,
make sure.
and mind you, while you were talking, I literally I got a text from my person saying that they canceled. So this is my last question, and we're going to be done, because I was like, all right, we are going a little over, but I couldn't stop you. I just couldn't stop you. So my last question to you, and I
Okay.
asked this of everybody, is if you had a personal ask and a professional ask of anyone that is listening right now, what would be your personal ask and professional ask? Because as small business owners, we are always asking personal and professionally, but we're not asking personally. So I think that we need to get a twofold from anyone that is part of this podcast.
Okay. My personal ask is do something in addition to social media to help a cause. No lie, that's my only personal ask. If you're
Wait, what does
passionate
that mean
about
when you say
something,
that?
if you're passionate about something, just saying it and using social media to vet your support, that's fabulous. Do one more thing in addition to social media. That's my only individual personal ask as just an individual. And remember that you have power. And then the professional ask, I would say, is whatever workplace you're in, if you have the opportunity, ask about that organization's diversity, equity, inclusion initiatives. Just asking the question will cause them to think, and asking the questions causes them to assume there's a demand. So keep asking. You don't have to demand it necessarily, because maybe you're not in a place where you feel comfortable doing so, but just wherever you work, ask about that workplace's diversity, equity, inclusion work, because as more organizations work on this, the better we'll be as a society, and the more systemic changes we can make. That's where my head is at in terms of both individual, personal and professional asks today.
Sue, thank you, thank you, thank you. Literally, like literally about 20 minutes ago when I said my last questions, but I'm like, I'm not going to stop her because she's on fire. She's always on fire. I tell people, just because I don't engage with you all the time, just because I don't send you emails or stuff like that. I obviously like things that are happening in your personal life. Doesn't mean that I'm not watching. I like, as a little kid, where I like sitting on the Met and watching people, I continue to watch people, and people are always so surprised. We're like, well, I didn't see you liking it. I'm like, I go, you know what? I'm the back algorithms where I'm seeing things and I'm so impressed. I'm so happy. If I didn't like you, I would have deleted you years ago. So
I'll take it. I'll take it. I just want to make sure I don't overstay my welcome. Thank you
no, my
so
God, this is the first of many, many conversations. I want everyone to understand that this was literally, it was going to be 2 weeks, and we were like, hey, the world's going to go back to normal. And more and more people have asked me, they're like, no one gives us this long form. And when I started my career in the media, we only did long form interviews because I can't get to know what you do unless I know where you came from. And I know you. And this conversation was like, holy crap. One, we have a lot of things similar, but I didn't know you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it was a pleasure. Thank you for having me. And I hope it helps at least one person somewhere who wants to do something.
I love it. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much, Sue. And until next time.